Hey everybody, welcome out to another week of Demystifying Post-Production. With me is our wonderful presenter, Ana Carolina Pereira. Welcome.
Hi, welcome back, everybody, and thank you so much for having me for week 3.
Yeah, good to see you. I'm super excited about today. I know we're going to jump into it really quick. Thank you for everybody for being here. Let me just do some housekeeping, our standard welcome introduction stuff that we do. First of all, if we go to our website, maxon.net, and then we go to the news button, and then we go to events, we can see all of the stuff coming up, all the amazing free shows and content that we have. It's starting to get into season of doing things where we do things in person. So we're going to be at NAB this year and a bunch of things. So stay tuned for those shows and whatnot, all those links as well. And then, as always, our sessions are recorded and they're put on our YouTube channel, which is the Maxon Training Team. So you go to youtube.com/Maxon Training Team. And also, not to put anyone on the spot or embarrass anyone, but our very own Ana Carolina has just released this thing on Cineversity. If you go to cineversity.maxon.net, new series. She did this Getting Started in ZBrush series, which is like excellent. If you're new to ZBrush, it is excellent. And answers so many questions for me that I just couldn't. I don't think we've even talked about this, Anna. Like, I don't think that we've had this conversation, but I've been through that series and it is epic. And a lot of things that like other people don't really talk about or whatever, you made this like crystal clear for me. Absolutely fantastic. And now this is Redshift in ZBrush. So it's just on Redshift and ZBrush, new series. So both of those are on Cineversity now and freely available. And also, finally, we have this link that we'll put in the chat. And if you use this link with the code Sculpting Worlds, so if you use this link, you'll go to the special secret website. It'll ask you for a password. The password is Sculpting Worlds, all caps. And then you can go to this thing and you could pick out a free piece of swag, a free t-shirt or hat or beanie. You just have to pay for the shipping. That's all you have to do is pay for the shipping, and that's it. Now, let's turn things over to Anna, that what everybody's been waiting for here, to talk to us about what we're going to be sharing or what we're going to be learning about today, which I'm super stoked about.
So, just as a little recap, last week we talked about how to get your models out of ZBrush and into Unreal using the UV master and making sure that there's a texture on there and all that stuff. We also set up a material for our little lizard boy here that we made together. And so this week, it's more about getting a scene together to house him. Okay, we're going to focus a lot on, general blocking out of the scene, which a lot of people call gray boxing, by the way, because, 9 times out of 10, we just end up throwing some gray boxes together. Some people call it white boxing. I don't think there's any actual difference there. Um, and we'll be creating this little scene. If you look here, I still have my PureRef board that we've used for 2 weeks now, and we'll see my reference image of what I wish this scene to look like. Okay. All in all, it's a simple scene. We can probably embellish it a little bit more by adding elements if we want to. And, to some degree, I'm super open to advice or requests from the audience. Okay. But the most important thing right now is to kind of break down the elements of the scene together. So I'm going to grab my Epic pen, which is this little software that lets you draw on your own screen. And I'm going to grab a little pencil. Maybe the pink is a good contrasting color. And we're going to break down the elements that we see. So first we have, obviously, clearly here, the main character, right? So that we have the character. Can you guys see that okay? Character. There we go. Then we have, obviously, the water right there. Like so. And of course, we have ripples, which we'll be discussing briefly today because I actually already brought in a material that does this. It's super fun. We have rock. We're going to be doing way more rocks than this, though. I love throwing rocks around in the in the editor. We have some sort of like grassy seaweed here. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but right here, does this look like extra seaweed to you? It looks like it to me. That right there.
It's hard to see
Uh,
from where I'm looking at,
it's it's like
but
really almost invisible. um, but we're gonna just call that seaweed. We'll just add our own too, just for more fun. So we got a couple of elements to add into here. I don't see any more. Next week we're going to be, refining the post processing, the lighting. We're going to be adding some bubbles, particle effects for this scene to really come together. All right. But today we're just going to set up all the items that need to be in there, starting, of course, with our blocking out. So let me switch out of Epic Pen. So the idea of a blockout is just like blocking out in ZBrush or blocking out a drawing by doing, big shapes and like light sketches underneath your drawing, where we need to set up this space for our scene to exist in. Where our focus is going to be layout and it's going to be scale. Those are the two things that we're going to focus the most here today. That being said, if you are interested in more the game development aspect of environment art and level layout, you're going to be want to explore a little bit more of a discipline called level design. Okay, level design is the general layouts, interaction, pacing that takes place in the map or worlds of your game. Again, the blocking out of that is still called gray box, but you're going to be thinking a little bit more about how the character or player um, exists in the world, how they walk around, how far they have to walk between things, how often events happen in interactables. And those of you who are here watching this today might be interested in some interactivity because that's really what makes Unreal shine, so to speak, right? So we're not going to necessarily go into interactivity today because our point is to make a pretty scene that just looks nice, but still keep that in mind. Level design goes a long way. Right before we started today's talk, actually, I was telling like Simon, Chad, and Max here behind the scenes, like how today's is going to be less exciting because it's a blockout. But Chad was like, "That's not true. Blockouts are so important, right?"
serious.
So just like in sculpting, the blockout is the foundation where everything else exists on top of, right? No amount of little pretty pieces of grass can make up for a level that's disjointed, doesn't have good composition and things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by putting in what I consider to be the ultimate foundation, which in this case is the landscape, right? At the end of the day, this is a pond, which leads me to believe that it's inset in the ground with a little bit of water inside, and we need to create this shape of the pond bowl, so to speak, the indentation in the ground. And just putting in, like you would in gray boxing, just putting in like a simple cube to block out the floor and stuff won't quite cut it this time, right? Because it's supposed to be more organic. So I'm going to delete that, and we're going to start by putting in a landscape. Those of you who love ZBrush are going to be super happy to know that the landscape is sculptable, just like in ZBrush. So let's go ahead and do it. By the way, all of these icons here, they're just icons showcasing where lights are and things like that. If you press G on your keyboard, you'll hide all the hidden in-game items. So these things are not made to be visible in game. So if you press G, you'll basically do like a game preview. Can be a little annoying sometimes, So the way we're going to get into landscape and eventually foliage as well for the little grassy seaweed and things like that is right here in the mode panel. The default mode is basically select, which lets me select items in the level and move them with the gizmo, like so. Okay, or rotate. We talked about all this last week, rotating and scaling as well. WER for those. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to select mode, and I'm going to go for landscape right there. You'll notice that something has changed. There's this green thing in the world now. If I zoom out, I can actually see how big it is. Okay, this is where my landscape is going to exist. The idea here is that you should make your landscape as big as you need it to be for your game or for your scene. So in my case, I don't need a big landscape because I'm literally just doing a tiny shot inside a pond, right? That being said, if you're doing a big open world or something, you might want a slightly bigger landscape than this. My selection right here, section size, I can choose how big the little sections are going to be, which does influence how big the landscape is going to be. See that? I think I'm going to choose 15 by 50. No, maybe even smaller, because our little guy is pretty small, right? We're not going to need all the space even. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller. And I think I'm going to go ahead and create. I'm going to create my little landscape, which will allow me to paint on it. There we have it. By now, you should know that this like gray checkerboard look is because there's no material applied. This is the default material that gets applied to things that don't have anything in them yet. If I zoom
Anna,
in, I can try. Yeah, of course.
Can I jump in and ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
You've been doing Unreal for a while, right?
Yeah.
So how does this compare to like the landmass plugin that was in Unreal 4.2, whatever it was? Because like the landmass plugin, like it was kind of like this like sculptable terrain, but you had to like uninstall or you had to install it as like a plugin. But this looks like it's like it was kind of like one of those like beta things that you could get via plugins. But this looks like it's like baked into the interface and the drop down and stuff.
It's baked in now. I don't know the exact differences. That was a long time ago. How long ago was that, Chad? Like
I
quite a
don't know.
bit.
Don't age me. I'm putting on the spot. I don't know. No, I don't know.
No.
I don't recall.
I've been in Unreal for a while, but I don't remember using the landmass. Also, yeah, I don't actually spend a lot of time doing landscapes, surprisingly. The idea here is, though, that it's perfectly built into the engine, and there's so much more you can do with it. Today, we're just looking at the basic options for landscapes, but for example, you can make height maps in ZBrush and other programs and bring those in and automatically apply them to the landscape, which will give you like your mountains and rivers and things like that, like automatically. It's really neat. So here we have our sculptable brush. To scale it, you can press the what do you call those in your keyboard? The square brackets. Thank you. We can use the brackets just like in Photoshop or ZBrush even to make them bigger or smaller. All right. You can also change the brush size by using the slider right here. Okay. The brush fall off is the hardness or softness of the brush. More fall off is softer. Less fall off is harder. Like so. So that will kind of control how your brush will actually apply. Okay. You can select the strength of your brush just like you would anywhere else. So right now it's set to strength 0 to 3. And if I click on there, see that? It's kind of creating a little height. If I make it super strong, the same click will go a lot farther. All right. That movement you see is kind of like the landscape automatically LODing in order to like save on computation. So I'm going to turn that slightly down a little bit. You can choose a bunch of brush types. For example, you can choose one that has an alpha, like so, which will kind of apply it more so where you see the alpha, see that? If you have an alpha, we can use that. I don't necessarily have one. I'm just going to keep things simple. We don't need to go crazy with it because of the concept. All right. Another one with an image and things like that. Let's just go back to the basic one. And then we have the tool types right here. So we have sculpt, which will kind of like bring up your model. And if you press shift, it will actually push in. So that's the keyboard shortcut. Shift creates indentation and non-shift, just clicking, creates a height. Okay. Then we're going to do smooth, which literally, just like in ZBrush, smooths the terrain. All right. Like so. Let me make some height here. Flatten will grab one point, whichever point you click on, it'll find that height for that, and it'll move everything else that same height. So if I start at the top of the mountain, it'll make everything tall. But if I start at the bottom, it'll flatten everything out like this. So either way, it'll catch the kind of the height of the first place you click and flatten it. And a lot of these other ones kind of like can come in a little bit later once you get more skills, like erosion, for example, will erode the mountain a little bit, things like that. Might be even better once you have a little bit more detail. We can tell that my little dragon baby has kind of gone underneath the ground, which makes sense because it is going to be a pond. So I'm going to take the normal sculpt brush and I'm just going to try to make the low pond, pressing shift and just kind of creating this indentation like so. However deep I want it. I don't think I want it too deep. I do want to be able to see that grass and whatnot. Do a little smoothing. You can see him coming halfway up there. And I'm going to kind of place my camera where I think I want the final shot to be, just to kind of see what's going on. I think something like this might be nice. It's not too perfect. I don't want it too perfect. If it's too smooth, look a little bit boring. And really what's going to really take this next level is going to be the rocks that are going to be making most of the mound and the landscape itself. So once I'm happy with that, I can simply switch modes back to selection mode. All right. If we want to, we can already assign a landscape material for now. I don't have that many fun materials right now, but we can make them better with time. But if I go ahead and I change the filter system to include materials, see this? It's actually already here, material. We can also choose material instance. So let's see. Where is that materials? Material instance. Basically, material instances are child materials. You can have a normal material, which we also call as master material, that has all of the math like we set up last time. And then the instance just takes all of that away and just kind of lets you use a really simple interface for the material. So for example, we have Nordic moss, we have mossy rock, all this stuff. Let's try the Nordic moss. And I'm just going to drop that right here, landscape material. Oh, let it compile shaders. I compiled a bunch of shaders last night, but sometimes it takes a little second. Here. There it is. Just taking a second. That's fine for a start. Again, when you're like blocking out, it doesn't actually matter that much what material is it going to be, and things like that. Okay. What matters most is the actual layout itself, because all of that can be improved as you go. Okay. Let's go ahead and put in my little guy into the position that I want him to be in at the end. So I'm just going to kind of have him be near the surface here. You'll notice that the gizmo is kind of pointing at a diagonal, making it more difficult to move him. Okay, that's because earlier I rotated him away from his straight position. In Unreal, you can use, just like in most 3D modeling software, you can use local space or world space movement, okay, or selection. Right now, he is set to local space, which means that we're using his own coordinates in order to switch which way's up, which way's down, like so. If I click this tiny little baby button right here all the way at the top that has a little cube on it, it's now worlds. It's got like an icon of a world. You'll see how that's straightened out, the gizmo. Whenever I'm in class and I'm trying to explain to students world space versus local space, I explain it this way. World space is the coordinates of your literal worlds, where you are in the world in relationship to the world itself. So the way I would describe it is world coordinates are more like north, west, south, and east, I said those in a weird order. Anyway, and local space is more like where things are in relationship to me. So right, left, front, or back, so that's kind of where that comes from. And sometimes switching between the two can be very beneficial. So, switch between the two by toggling this little button right there. All right. So I'm going to put my little guy where I think he's going to be. When we're doing single shots in Unreal, a very common tactic is to pre-select where your camera is going to be and use that camera as kind of like almost like a thumbnail viewer of how the composition is turning out, like you would with a normal painting, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a camera right here instead of cinematic, Cine Camera Actor. That's what I always call it. I'm pretty sure there's like a specific way to call this thing, like a different name, but I'm just reading it. I'm going to place my camera and I'm going to point it towards the lizard in whatever direction I want. Sometimes I even like controlling the camera directly. So I'll right click on the camera and I'll go to Pilot, Cine Camera Actor. And now I am the camera. The camera is me, okay? See this right here? Pilot active, Cine Camera Actor 1. That means that as I move and rotate, the camera is also moving and rotating. And I'm actually seeing through the camera's eye or lens in this case. See this? So you can even see that it's a little blurry because it's got a little focal depth things that are going on, like a little FOV, things. And let's bring in my reference. So I think I need to pull back a tiny bit. All right. And I think I need to pull face upwards a little bit. Flaws with my landscape are going to start becoming apparent because, we can see the bottom, for example. So that means we need to make the river or the pond a little bit more deep in this area. That's okay. Choose a location for your camera, figure out your composition. And in fact, the Cine Camera Actor has a rule of thirds viewer. So the way we're going to see that is if we select perspective and we switch to the cinematic viewport instead, and in there we select the camera actor, we now can see it here in real time. See this little grid panel? You can choose the grid 3x3 like so. And guess what? It'll create a rule of thirds grid. Chai, I feel like you know more about this than me. Do you want to explain to the audience what the rule of thirds does?
I mean, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't be. But basically, if you have something in the center, it's not very artistically composed. It's just kind of like right there. And so oftentimes we divide up the image into thirds and then put objects on the third. And the thinking is that, if we have 1/3 of our frame is taking up with the subject, there's a lot of like emotional weight. There's like a lot of weight that we put on that side. And then that's kind of like the equivalent of like 2/3 of empty space. And so then we create like a well-balanced composition by doing that.
Yeah. That's better than I could describe it. The way I like to describe it is you see these little thirds here, just put it somewhere in the areas where it matches. All right, so let's try that. Like I'll just
That's not true.
throw it closer to throw it closer to that. Okay. I'm gonna keep it like this for now.
Can I jump in and ask you a question really quick?
Mm-hmm.
We had a question in the chat from our good buddy Ian Robinson, like you, a ZBrush legend. And he wanted to know, can we use Substance Painter materials in UE5?
Absolutely, you can. There's
Wow.
actually a plugin that
Whoa.
allows you to port them over directly, like kind of like a bridge. Actually, I have not tried it with 5, but I would assume, like, if it's worked this far, with 4, I would assume it works with 5. There are a couple limitations on using materials with 5 nowadays, because a huge thing that made materials so powerful was displacement, which basically allows the material to, how do I put it, like alter the vertices, positions in space when it comes to the actual 3D model itself. So in Unreal 4, we can like make a flag wave with displacement. We can make the ground have pebbles and stuff. And they disabled that feature. And I am waiting patiently until they enable it again. Wow. The word on the street is that the conspiracy is that since Nanite came out, they're trying to make everybody use Nanite, because Nanite does a similar thing and it makes surfaces really detailed. But you can't use Nanite in these very specific scenarios, unfortunately. So definitely look into that. I can't say with I can say it with 99% certainty on that one.
So like normal maps, can you use normal maps to do like fake displacement or semi displacement a little bit, or is that this thing that they took away out of Nanite?
No. So you can still use normal maps. That is totally fine, but normal maps don't actually do anything when it comes to the surface of the mesh. It only it kind of imagine as if it bends light to its will to pretend that there's surface texture on there, right? But if you look at it from the side, like a bump map. But if you look at it from the side, it doesn't actually do anything. It's flat.
Okay.
Displacement is actually going to take the vertices of the mesh and push them in or out like a height map to make it high or low. So that's the fun of it. That's kind of, gone for now. Which, if you're using Substance Designer, there's a lot of that stuff in Substance Designer. There are folks out there that do entire 3D models out of textures in Designer, using displacement and alpha cards and things like that. Which, so I think we're all waiting for this feature to be turned back on if possible. I don't know. Can't speak for that too much though. That's my conspiracy. Don't
It
nobody
sounds
email the folks
plausible.
at Epic saying Anna the streamer has been spewing conspiracies and bring back displacement. I mean, do message them and ask them for displacement. Just don't put me in it. Just saying. All right. So with the camera, I need to select it again. I deselected it. Camera actor right there. I'm going to go ahead and focus on my focal point, which is going to be the little baby dragon. So if I search for focus, manual focus distance, I like doing this because I can just use the little eyedropper tool and select my dragon. And then focus on it. Looks like there's some sort of maybe offset or something going on. Let's see. Whoa, making it worse. No worries. Just use the sliders, folks, and then eventually it'll get there. There, okay. Now at least my little lizard is focused. You can actually show the debug plane right here, and it'll show you kind of where that focus transition is happening, which can be really useful if I want to unfocus part of it, for example. I know he looks a little dark. That's okay. Okay, we will fix that with lighting, the power of lighting. So once my composition, let's say like my working composition for now is here, I'm going to stop piloting the camera. It is so important that you stop piloting the camera. Okay, folks, like literally, if I make any move from here, it's going to move the camera too, right? I'm the camera. So press the eject button, boop, like so. And now I can move around the world freely, but my camera is still in this spot. This is the preview. If I select any other actor, the preview goes away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the camera again, and I'm going to click. Guys, the icons are so tiny. I'm just going to describe them to you, and you'll have to remember. But it's a little like push pin icon. Okay, click that, and now this will be pinned onto your viewports no matter what happens. So I can move around, I can do stuff, and see this preview is still the same. That's useful because, as I'm putting stuff down, I want to see what it's going to look like from the final render. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to go back to my normal default viewport. Oh, I accidentally unpinned it. Let's pin it.
Can I ask you another question?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, if I'm getting annoying, let me know.
No,
please. In the chat, you can say that I'm annoying. I'll calm it down. I'm just excited about all this stuff, and I want to learn it. So it was my understanding that in Unreal 4, in order to get a shallow depth of field, the only way I knew how to do it was to go into the sequencer. But you're not in the sequencer, you're just like in the regular game view. So I think maybe I was wrong, or maybe they updated it in Unreal 5. Or like in the game view, would you be able to have like that shallow depth of field look? Would you be able to have like the FOV that you called it?
So this is using a cinema camera actor, which has those options. I'm not sure if the normal first person camera has those options built in, but I think so. And yes, you can have this during gameplay. Like if you replace, for example, let's say you're doing a first person game, you replace the camera on that actor with the cinematic camera, and then you have all of these options right here still available to you. You'll be able to use it. Not necessarily should. It's a could. It's a not a should.
But so you could have shallow depth of field while you're playing the game?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's I like to think that almost everything's possible. It's just really sometimes kind of a pain to figure it out. But yeah. If you want, I can look into it as in the future.
No. I'll look it up. I'll figure it out. Thank you so much.
No worries. Oh, I'm smoothing it. So that's why nothing's changing. I'm going to just kind of, since we're here, I'm going to push in this front area of my pond. All right. Thinking about making, I ended up never importing the pose version. Do you guys remember the pose version from last week? I'm going to import that off camera. And I was thinking it would be really cute to make a second dragon with a different pose and have them be playing with each other or something like that. So I might do that. If you guys want to see how the posing was done, please visit last week's video. Right at the end, we posed it. Okay. But that's fine. Chad, what do you think? Maybe I'll just add a little bit more bumpiness to the outside so the silhouette looks nicer. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems I wonder if that line at the top we want to fiddle with that. But I guess if it's gonna be covered in water, we might not.
It's gonna be covered, with water, which we could do right now. back to the selection mode. Let's throw in a plane. So a plane is kind of like a default primitive. So you can just grab it from straight from the place actors. This used to be called the modes menu. Grab a plane, and I'm just going to put it right here and make it way wider. Kind of just like cover the little guy. And you'll notice that even though it's changing the lighting inside of my preview, I can't see the plane because the plane is actually only one-sided. All right. So we have two options here. We can make a material that's two-sided, or we can, since it doesn't really matter for gameplay, we can just turn it upside down. It's all good. Nobody has to know, you know? There's this sound on TikTok that I quote to myself all the time. It goes like, they're going to know. Nobody's going to know. They're going to know. How would they know? So there's the plane right there. That's going to be our wonderful water. All right. If we want to take our block up to the next level, we could, for example, make it blue, you know, just for now. I see Ian. How will they know? Right how will they know? Right. And that's kind of like game development in general. How would they know? All right. So now we have kind of like the top and bottom of our worlds. I'm not going to go too crazy with it, even though I did bring in a material that I made for class a few weeks ago. Next, I'm going to temporarily hide the plane by pressing H because I want to add in the foliage. Let's just add in a little bit of that grassy seaweed right here. And I don't think I have a seaweed mesh because I was looking on Quixel. I'm like, has anybody found seaweed yet? But there's no real seaweed mesh, but there is some sort of grassy little thing somewhere in here. Oh my god, there's so much stuff in here.
Do you want to briefly explain Quixel in case there's anybody like new to the deal?
Of course. Quixel started off as its own company where they do amazing 3D scans of things, both for materials and actually for meshes nowadays. So think of like realistic scans of moss, rock, concrete, rusted metal, things like that that can be turned into that were turned into tileable textures, and also things like this. These rocks, for example, if I bring them in, they're going to compile in 1 sec. If I bring these in, you'll see that they're scanned because obviously they're not going to have a bottom, like so. That's one way to tell if something's been scanned or not. FYI, it's a fun little fact. Because if you walk up to a pile of rocks, odds are you're going to scan just the top, right? You're not going to like move 40 pounds of rocks or something to scan the bottom of it too. So these are scanned from real life, which makes them extremely realistic. As you can tell, like this is the kind of like detail that we just might not get from manually texturing, and if we did, it would take a long time, you know. There are texture artists out there who their entire life is doing this kind of stuff, like, you know, getting the little bent grasses and things on that dead leaves and whatnot. So Quixel was purchased by Epic, I believe, in some way or form. Some years ago. So now they have free Quixel assets in the Epic Marketplace. Why don't I pull up the Epic Games Launcher real fast to show you guys how you can actually access multiple assets in the marketplace. Okay, so here is what the marketplace looked like. Some of you guys are going to be very intimate with this if you like playing games, because they also have the game store in here. But everybody has access to this nowadays, which is crazy. Every person who has ever bought a game on the Epic store can now, on accident, stumble on the Unreal Engine on their own, you know. But anyway, the point is you're going to go to Unreal Engine tab, and right here we have Marketplace, Samples, Library, and Twin Motions. So the Marketplace is where you're going to find. It's a little slow. I personally always give it a little time. The Marketplace is where you can sell and buy and download assets. Imagine every type of asset that you could possibly use in the engine, in a game, in a rendering. It's here, okay? So VFX particles, sounds, looping music, procedural tools, materials, textures, decals, skeletal meshes, entire skeletal system.
Oh, I think Anna froze. Or maybe it's just my system.
I'm back.
Yes.
Okay, sorry guys.
Cool.
My internet hitched. I was too arrogant to bring up the launcher. I thought I could get away with so much. Okay, we're good. So every month they give you a free 5 assets. All right. And so if you get into Unreal, I recommend downloading them just in case you need them in the future. I have like hundreds of these free things. Okay. And if you search for Quixel, or they're also called mega scans, better than a normal scan, it's a mega scan. Uh, you'll find all of the Quixel assets, and they're all free again. Because Epic has, purchased these libraries for us. So you got Quixel vegetables, Quixel cobblestones, chopped wood, abandoned apartment buildings, all this good stuff. Actually, I think the job of going out and like scanning stuff is probably really fun. I don't know if you agree. It just sounds like it would be fun.
That sounds very
Uh,
interesting, actually.
yeah.
Especially if you have to go remote and you have to like, oh, fly me to Africa because I need to get some African bamboo, if that's a thing. I don't know, whatever it is. It'd be fun.
Like people in the industries already do that, right? Like we end up going to locations, take photos for reference for games and movies and stuff. But this is just like next level. You bring the location home with you practically, you know? So
Very
these are all
cool.
free for you, and they are very realistic. So of course, if you want to do a non-realistic scene, then maybe don't use these. But they do set the tone as far as realism goes. So that's where I got these from. All right,
Now,
and
I
I
have a
was able to put them on my level. Go
quick
ahead.
question about that. So, I'm used to Cinema 4D, which has like this cloner system that's like one of its big draws, and it's just like really easy to take a bunch of content and scatter it, randomize it in a million different ways, animate it in a bunch of different ways, all this kind of stuff. Is there a way to like if I wanted to populate this with a bunch of, let's say we're doing a shot outside the water too, and we want to see like all the landscape, and so like all these like rocks and trees and plants, like what is there a, you don't have to go into it, don't show us, but like is there a way to kind of quickly distribute assets and randomize them like all over the place, or do I have to go one by one and be like this rock goes there, that tree goes there?
Uh, I'm glad you asked because that's actually what I'm going to show next.
Oh, okay.
I literally just have to find the right grass that I had already selected beforehand. And then we're going to get started on that. And if I don't find the grass, then we'll just do something else. But I think the grass is probably in here, right? Like this seems like the place that the grass would be. We got some underwater plants here. I just don't know what it's called. 3D plants. Let's pick a random one. This seems fine here. This looks like similar vegetation to what we see here. So I'm just going to open that up real fast. And we're going to check it out. One thing I have noticed with switching to Unreal 5 is that at least for me, the waiting periods between like compiling shaders, packaging your project at the end, turning it into like an executable and things like that, it does take a little longer. Maybe it's just on my computer, but I have noticed that. Okay, there we have it. A beautiful quixel plant. Okay, let's scatter these into the world. The tool you're looking for is the foliage paint right here. It's underneath
Mm.
landscape, foliage. And you can, let me move this little guy. We can create our own brush of sorts that will randomly apply things into our world. So if I drag my plant into here, I can put in as many as I wish. So let's find a second variant of something else. Does that look like seaweed? Last night I
And
was like, yeah, give me all the plants. And I did not think about the possibility of having too many. All right. So there I have two types of plants. And by default, it's going to try to randomize between the two, like so. So this is the default settings right here. Those are a little big, right?
mhm.
Oh yeah, those are ferns. I hadn't noticed that. That's fine. So that it's going to create a little brush just like before for the landscape, but instead it's going to find static meshes in the landscape and apply these plants to that place. Basically, finding the highest point in the landscape. So that's part of why this is so much fun, because I can simply come in here and paint, and it will literally know which ways, where to put the plants, like so. So I'm going to take out this one. I'm going to just kind of click off the selecting tool and maybe find a better plants real fast. This looks interesting. Let's see what that looks like. Throw that on there. Can't even see it in there. Good enough, whatever. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and I'm going to change the settings of the painting. Let's zoom out and like do it over here, just so we can kind of see the differences. All right. So the default looks something like this. I can change the paint density, which will change the density of things inside of my brush. See that? So more means more plants, less means less plants, like so. Okay. The erase density will actually erase the plants as well. So you can actually have erasing in here, which is good. Where is it? Erase. You can also, if you change the erase density, it won't erase everything. So that's pretty neat. Like, let's say you have too many plants in one spot, but you want to just kind of make it more sparse without erasing everything. There you go. That's how you do that. Back to paint, like so.
Is there a quick way to get it to make it so the plants don't intersect or overlap automatically? Like they kind of have like a spacer? Cinema 4D has like this, like a deformer that kind of pushes things apart. It's kind of cool.
I've never been asked that or tried it before. I'm not sure.
It's all good.
Move. Okay, so the hacky way is to make your eraser brush really tiny.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's smart.
And then just come in here and just erase that one. Like, that's the non-fancy. My tech heart doesn't like that one, but it's what it is right now. Thank you so much for asking that question, though. Maybe somebody in chat will know. Yeah, you got to dig into the settings to access it, though. Okay. Justin is telling us here. Okay, I don't even know where the settings for this thing is.
Justin's delivering the goods today with all the comments.
All right. So that's the basics of it. If I click on the actual plants themselves, I'll access more settings. So maybe that's where the secrets are going to be. Let's find out. Secret sauce. Okay. So the first thing I want to do. Oh, here's the radius. Minimum distance between foliage instances. There you go. Yay. That's cool. Okay, we figured it out on our own. How fancy are we?
With Justin's help.
Oh, I made it too big. The radius is so much bigger than the brush itself now.
Wow. That's cool.
Okay. All right. The scaling. The scaling here, you can actually change the scale by changing the minimum and maximum. So let's say I want some of them to be big and some of them to be small. Oh, I think I made it too small now. Where are they? Let me hide the other plants real fast. So let's do 0.9. Looks like I have broken it. The radius went back to normal. Yeah. So 0.3, let's say. And now you see that they've got some big ones and some little ones. So we're starting to get a better result, right? It's important with plants to make sure they're not too uniform. That is key, right? We do a lot of, especially in the game art major at the Ringling College where I work, they do a lot of biomes. And I don't particularly participate in those lessons, but I know that we have so many rules when it comes to making believable foliage. So I'm gonna just spit some out for you guys, okay? Just let's freestyle this. So the first thing is, to make them look natural, they do need to have different sizes, and you got to think about the plant's life cycle a little bit. So about a third of the plants should be juvenile plants, a third should be mature, and a third should be dead or dying. So that way you're going to get so much more variety. I don't believe I have a dying variant here. Oh, here's the little guy I was looking for. This is the plant I was looking for all along, right here. The one that looks like the grassy seaweed in the thing. So I'm gonna click on that, and I'm also gonna change its size. So I'm gonna switch between like 0.1 and 1. It's a little too big, so I'm gonna make the maximum size also smaller. That way, it looks more grassy, I guess. And we also need to make the original plants much smaller. So let's do 0.2 as the biggest size and 0.05 as the smallest. I think we're getting somewhere. I'm going to increase the paint density of my brush because if we look at my reference, it's like literally a grassy field, right underneath. So we need solid density. So I'm going to, really try to bring that up a little bit more. And let's see. I think that should be enough to get us going. Just kind of like start painting. Oh, I should probably get rid of all these extra plants that I put in here first, just before we forget. Because at the end of the day, they are going. Oh no, clicked off. They are going to be, part of the what do you call it? Expense of the level. But it looks like I might have done something a little funky in here. I'm just going to remove. All right, just manually deleted all of those. Let's start zooming in. Foliage. Make that real fast. Little foliage type. High density. Maybe I'll even make it more dense.
So when you clicked
I'm
out
trying
of
to
that
erase.
area, it like got rid of all of your gorgeous. It got rid of all of the like foliage settings, it looks like. All of
It
the
did.
collection that
I
you
think. Not. Maybe it's an Unreal 5 thing. Oop.
Okay.
So I'm going to try, of course, making it smaller now. 2. Make sure that the scaling is uniform. Otherwise, if you let it be free, it's going to like scale slightly different on like every axis, and it's going to be funky. Let me turn up the density even more now that they're smaller. Density, let's go. Starting to get somewhere though. I think they need to be a little bit bigger. The big ones need to be a little bit bigger. So. And according to my reference, these actually go pretty far. Ooh. Oh, here's a funky little thing that happened. I accidentally applied some plants on my little dragon. Do you see that? So the plants, they don't really know the difference, to be honest, of what I'm trying to achieve, like which parts of the level are supposed to have plants or not, which is why I hid the plane, because if the plane was still in here, the plane would also get plants on it. So I'm going to just kind of erase if I can. For some reason, my eraser is not working properly. But I'm going to fix the little dragon, even though it looks adorable, actually. But, let's keep going and just kind of plant these on. A little bit more. Oh, wait, I have to hide the dragon. So select hide by pressing H, or H on the keyboard will hide it temporarily. And then let's continue. So try not being like me and not putting hairs all over or grass all over your little guy.
A comment in the chat said there's a setting on your brush to not paint static meshes.
Oh, nice. Here's that. You can tell I've always used this in a very basic manner, just because, I've always just used it for a little pizzazz of grass. A pizzazz of grass.
Those settings are killer in Unreal. They just scroll and scroll and scroll indefinitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. You can change a ton of stuff. Like, for example, if you don't want your grass to be on slopes, you can change that here.
Oh, wow.
Maximum slope angle. So if like you don't want it to be like on 45-degree angle, you can do that and it'll automatically not do that. It's actually really cool to like get more info on this stuff.
Wow.
Let me just make it even. a little bit more, just right here. And then
Tego
maybe I'll
says
do.
it's under painting, the blue checks. Blue checks under painting is where you do the static mesh things. Oh, maybe that's like one of
Oh,
the check mark that's already there.
there it is. It
Oh,
was
got
right
it, got
here
it.
all along. Filters, landscape, static meshes, BSP, foliage, and translucent. Like so. Um, so that is the foliage basics of the foliage brush. Um, so if you ever want to, add more assets and things like that, like you can. It's super fun. And the best part is that it's all instanced, which means that um, all of these count as basically one instance of the mesh, which means it's more optimized than like hand placing static meshes here and there, which is why we can get away with more. That being said, depending on the materials you put on the plants, you can run into some optimization troubles. And now that you're in the world of Unreal Engine, you have to worry about that kind of stuff. You have to worry about uh, optimization and runtime and things like that. Because it will get heavy. And little by little, we're noticing the convergence of worlds as far as it comes to like people making movies and shows and things like that in Unreal. In fact, if you guys ever watched the new House of the Dragon show, like the Game of Thrones one, like all the VFX were done with Unreal actually in that, and it was all
Whoa.
captured real time with a volume. Have you guys ever heard of that? I don't want to go like on a huge tangent, but I will if I have to. Let me show
Yeah,
you
I just took a
something.
tour in Seattle up here of an LED volume studio, Vossler Studios. And it was, and like I got to see like this demo of how they use Unreal in real time to make commercials and simulate environments and do they call it ICVFX. That's the cool new term, in camera visual effects.
It is so neat.
And it's really cool.
It's really cool. So basically, for those of you who don't necessarily know, it's basically the high end stuff. There's the low end stuff and the high end stuff, but the high end stuff uses LCD screens to show you real time what you'd be seeing in Unreal. And as you move your camera in the real world, the background updates to create proper perspective. Some of the benefits of this is that it takes away a lot of post production time, but it adds pre production time. So it is one of those things like the environment has to be done before the scenes are shot. But the thing is that it also impacts how the characters look, because these are again lights that are going to be bouncing off their skin, their hair, and things like that. So it does a lot of real-time lighting, which is super neat. Like you'll notice, I think this is the kind of thing that they did House of Dragon on, like a huge like amphitheater, and you don't actually notice that many lights besides the LED screen. I like this. I can't wait to see where this goes. It's one of my special passions. And of course, the ZBrush Summit that we discussed week 1 was done in something like this, but it was a green screen room. So all of the composition of putting the images behind the presenters was done in Unreal, but not behind them, just in the computer, which is a second way to do this. One thing I wonder about this system is, what if you want to make last minute changes? Are you locked in, with all of that? Because the stuff is literally in. So then you can like composite out things from the background and then put them back in. So, I do wonder about that. I wonder if we're going to stick with this method or
They do
not.
that all the time. It's like most shots require a little bit of cleanup at least, but you have
Mhm.
all of the camera data that you could easily bring in your compositing application because you have it captured from Unreal on set. So
Yeah.
makes it makes things a lot easier.
It's such a cool thing, and it also helps the actors feel grounded in the world, because like if you see the dragon right behind you, like it's a lot easier than like acting, normally with just a normal green screen setup they'll have like a stick with like a ball in the end of it or something, like a tennis ball, and they're like, here's where the dragon is, like that. So you actually see it. Although I went to a talk at Unreal Fest about this particular one, and the actors felt very disoriented because the whole background shifts around you when the camera shifts. So it's like a weird like, whoa, what's going on kind of effect all around you.
Yeah.
Anyway, even with that stuff, even though it's not a game, it's still real time because you're literally projecting that stuff real time into your. Oh, looks like I'm freezing up a little bit. You're still projecting stuff real time into your screen. So it's one of those things, you got to watch out for too many polygons, too many models in the scene. And lately, one of the most expensive things is materials. Materials are some of the heaviest things you're going to get, especially transparency. So things like this little grass, they might have a little bit of transparency on there. I'm going to stop painting. I'm going to go to selection mode, and I'm going to switch from my lit to my uh where is she? Optimization view modes. Optimization is just a word for like trying to improve the performance of whatever it is that you're doing, I guess. And I'm going to go to shader complexity. Let it think for a sec. One sec. Okay. So these are nice and cheap, actually. You'll see this. You can kind of see the bar underneath here. You'll see that this bar has color coding. So green being good, this brownish red color being not so good, red being bad, and whites and pink being extremely bad. So Unreal will tell you where the problem is if you know how to look for it. So in this case, our friends at Quixel didn't do a bad job at all of optimizing this for us. So thank you, Quixel folks. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my lit mode. And now I can bring back all of my dragon and my plane. The command for bringing back, oh no, I got him again. The command for bringing things back that are hidden is Control H. Will bring back everything you have hidden all at the same time. Okay. You can also select the object in here and turn on or off the eyeball. Okay. One thing I forgot to mention is that when I imported the dragon, I imported its eyes, skin, and wings separately as like they were subparts of the low poly mesh, right? So I actually ended up grouping them together so that when I move one, I move all of them. The way I did that is I selected each one. I shift selected so that I select multiple like so. And then I Control G for grouping. All right. For those of you who aren't necessarily knowing that particular thing. And now I can move them all together. So let's go ahead and take a look at this disastrous lighting situation that we have going on here. Doesn't look very underwater for now. I know, guys. Just bear with me. This is just a blockout, okay? I'm going to remove all these extra lights that are in the level. I'm not going to remove the sunlight, I don't think, but everybody else has basically got to go. The sunlight is kind of neat because by changing the angle, by changing its rotation, you're basically changing the time of day. And according to my reference image, which I will be using a lot, it just looks like it's like top-down lighting, right? It doesn't look like to you, Chad. I think it is just from the top.
Yeah.
Noon,
most like underwater
moments.
stuff, like that's the only light source pretty much is top down because the sun's coming in.
So I'm going to do that. All right. And I'm going to make the source intensity a little lower. I have this habit when I'm trying to light that this is personal. Like I'm not a lighting master or professional or anything like that. There are people that will literally do lighting as their job, that's not me, but I do like starting with a lower lighting influence from external aspects of the world. So sometimes even HDMIs are too much for me, or HDRI, sorry. And the HDMI cables are coming in. They're getting me. The HDRIs, skies, directional lights, all that stuff that can be a little too much for me. So I like, having a little bit more control over it. So I just gonna turn it down, not to make it too dark or anything, but turn it down. And the skylight in Unreal, it basically creates bounce lighting. That's like a fake version of bounce lighting. It lightens up your shadows. Okay. If your shadows are ever pitch black, then you need to fix your skylight. This is what 0% skylight looks like. Okay. It's just like a fancy special way of making sure that you get that balanced lighting without having to compute like global illumination and things like that too much. You know, it's just cheaper. And you can, of course, change the color of both. So just to get started on the underwater vibes, I'm going to notice that all the shadows in here are kind of teal, right? So I'm going to just, you know, throw some teal on there just to kind of get that party going as far as being underwater. I don't want to make it too dark because, you know, if you darken a light, it kind of just dims it. You know, there's no such a thing as like actual black light. As far as I know, I'm not, maybe the scientists will tell me I'm wrong 5 years from now when they find some sort of black light that we've been missing in the universe so long, you know, but until then, we're just going to make it like, you know, not too saturated, not too dark or anything like that. Like so. And you can also change the intensity of your skylight. Oh my gosh. It's a party in here. This is what my students feel like when I turn on the lights. I'm just going to make it a little bit brighter because, you know, I think I'm going to rely on that a little bit more in order to create that kind of atmosphere. Okay. So then, gosh, there's so much to do. And I know we're just blocking out the scene and stuff like that. Let me just rotate this little guy. I think I'm going to have him facing like more towards the camera or something. And then like I'll bring in like a baby off camera, literally off camera when I'm not during the stream. And I'm just going to have the other baby be around here somewhere, you know, with like different colors. And then that will give us more of a storytelling moment. Oh, speaking of storytelling moments, yesterday I spoke with Kyle Balda, animator and director, right? For the podcast, quick podcast plug. Watch the Industry Standards podcast. Anyway, and I think I was just being dumb my whole life, but I did not realize the involvement of story, acting, emotion, and animation, which is like super obvious now that I think of it, right? And storytelling is really how you hook an audience, how you make somebody interested in your model. Like, think of all of the best pieces of art in the future. You know, they have story, intrigue, mystery. Somehow they invoke an emotion, even if they're simple. The Mona Lisa has an emotion that everybody wants to decode for years, you know. Or when it comes to Michelangelo's David or the creation of Adam, like all of that has a story behind it that you want to learn more about, right? At least I do. So just having a little dragon is cute, and it does a good job of showcasing our environment, arts, and our character skills. But people will look at that for 2 seconds and move on with their lives, right? But if we put in a little bit of a story, even if it's just two baby dragons playing with each other, that's way richer than just a single baby dragon vibing and not doing anything underwater. You know, so I don't know. I'm going to try to keep that in mind now that I've been freshly educated about this topic.
That's a great tip.
Isn't it? So he went into so much storytelling because he also plays D&D, and like the idea of, you know, how you motivate a character, how you motivate the audience to care about your character is a whole thing. You know, let me find my rocks while we discuss this topic out of my library of 1,000 rocks in here. For the rocks, I'm actually going to place them by hand. I'm going to try to get like a composition going. You know, I just don't want, I don't want to make this part random. And I did find some really great rocks. And also we have some like dead trees and stuff, which will be perfect for our scene. And then we're going to, of course, just tinge the whole thing green. So it's okay if the rocks are a little funky or a little different color. It's all good. Nobody's going to know, right? Kind of thing. So I'm going to drag on these rocks and I'm going to place them, if it'll let me, I'm going to place them as I wish into the scene. I'm going to even have them like kind of line the floor a little bit because right now the floor is so boring, you know. So I'm going to find like the coolest shaped rocks I have, put them in, scale them as I want to. That creates a nice little frame, right, for our composition, you know, kind of like a bounding area almost. Maybe I'll move it back though a little bit. See how, like, if I move it in local space, it's going to also slide towards the characters. So if I want world space, it might, actually, never mind. My camera is just the one that's crooked. Let's move it back a little bit like so. and like just still get that frame, which breaks up that line. It's just generally like a nicer composition, I think, if we just kind of think about how we're going to frame this little guy in. There are so many composition tips, and people that are just amazing at composition out there, that will give you all this advice. Like, for example, how do you create the focal points of your scene? I like to say to my students that the trick is to create contrast. Like, if you can kind of like make generalizations in your mind about contrast, you got it. So what could it be? I can't select my rocks anymore. Weird. I've been banished from editing these rocks. 1 sec. Let me just find them in the world outliner. Okay, that's funky. That has never, not once, not one time in my whole life happened. Also, what's this called? Asset reg. Oh, okay, that's the. Okay, there you go.
There you go.
Okay, there it is. Where was I? Contrast, like, is a great way to lead the eye to where you wish it to go in a composition. So the idea here being that 8 times out of 10, the eye will naturally travel to the area of most contrast. So that could be color contrast, light contrast, or value. It could be detail contrast. There are some exceptions, of course. For example, we are hardwired to seek out human faces. So if you have a human face in your composition, we're going to also use that as a kind of natural focal point. So we can use lights and things like that. We can also use frames to kind of like create kind of like almost like a doorway or window into our scene, that makes it all worth it. I'm going to go ahead and save real fast for a second. And that is probably the biggest tip I can give you today, is when you're working with a heavier software like Unreal that uses both the CPU and the GPU simultaneously for the win, you might want to start saving. If losing work can be disastrous. Just ask any one of my students. So just always be saving, okay? I'm gonna maybe like even duplicate by pressing Alt and dragging. Duplicate my little dragon and maybe like I'll make it a little bit smaller and just kind of like use a placeholder for where the other baby is going to go. Like maybe I'll turn on local space and like put it in a slightly different position or something. Just for now. Woo, we're best friends. Or something like that. Just for the fun of it for now. So let's keep dressing this set. So common word used for this kind of placing of objects in the scene is set dressing. You're literally set dressing a scene like it was in a movie or a play or something, and a good idea is to think about the story you're telling, what the space is supposed to be. I have this funky, like my students have this funky problem at school where whenever they're designing a game set, they'll design it as a game set. Like if you guys have ever played a game that felt gamey and like you're in a factory, but like there's no way this factory was ever real or ever worked to do anything because why are the platforms like this? Things like that. So students have a bad habit of that. They don't think about the set as something that's supposed to make logical sense in the real world. They only think about it as a game. So I always tell them that you need to think about the set as, of course, a game designer, and you have to think about the set as an architect, right? You're making a space set in a factory and it's interactive. Okay, it has to be fun to play, but also it has to be a factory that somebody would actually set up. Oh, that one problem rock disappeared. I didn't delete it.
Weird.
Oh my god, it's haunted. Okay, I'll just add a different rock.
Hey, there's another cool question in the chat. Is it possible to increment save automatically? And also, if you do increment save on your own, like if you wanted to like create like a level and duplicate it, do you just rename it like V2, or do you have like a workflow, or is there an automatic workflow with that?
So how do I, 9 times out of 10, as far as I know, no. Okay, so like um, it will auto save the same level that you're currently working on. Okay, so be careful with that. Um, Normally, if I want to increment, I will just create a new level with a different name, like O2 or something like that. That being said, if you are working in Unreal and you're actually working on a real project, let's say that is for clients or something like that. We actually did this for the ZBrush Summit. You're going to use source control. Okay. I don't know how popular source control is in most other industries. I imagine in some way it's popular, right? Chad, have you ever done source control when you were doing projects and stuff?
No, I don't know what that. This is a new
Okay,
thing
I'm
for
going to
me.
explain.
Okay.
Basically, it's the idea of using a server based software that does backups and that does revisions of your work. So for the ZBrush Summit, me and my team use GitHub, which is I'm pretty sure like almost everybody's heard of GitHub before. It's where all the hacker man game boys or whatever are in, doing that stuff. And the idea is that we're working on our project, we save, that's saved to our hard drive. If anything happens to our hard drive to the level and we don't have a backup, well then we're screwed basically. The idea is like it is true. There's no backup for that. But if you're using source control, you're going to have all of these times that you sent your work to the server. So you're going to be like, I'm done for today. I'm uploading it to the server. And now you have a server that's got all of these backups for you, and it goes a long way. So for us in the ZBrush Summit, we use GitHub. But for my entire career, I've used something else called Perforce, which is literally the bane of every student's existence. FYI, like we do not get along well with Perforce. And I understand. The very first time I ever tried it, I lost an entire days of work at work. So that was fun,
Oh,
you
okay.
know. Um, but the idea is that yeah, you're working on your project, and the thing is, you're making a game or a big scene or some sort of project, a virtual set, whatever. I have a habit of calling them games, but the world's converging, so soon we're going to stop that. Um, so let's say I am working on one of those. I'm also working with a teammate. You know, what happens if my teammate edits the level that I'm in? Because if they have access to my Unreal project, they have access to my level that I'm currently working on, right? What happens if they change it while I'm also changing it? Well, Unreal does not do well with, if you're working, for example, on binary code or something like that, you can actually integrate your changes into a file and it's no problem. Um, However, Unreal levels and assets do not do that. So whoever saves it last gets the save, you know?
Mm.
So that's why we need to have all these workflows in place so that we don't save over each other, and things like that. And things like Perforce will actually stop you from like sabotaging your teammates and things like that on accident, by locking you out of files that are being edited by somebody else, for example, and things like that. So it's a long spiel about the question, but um, the idea is that personally I've always worked with source control software, and if you are thinking about doing this stuff professionally, you should consider getting some source control software, and GitHub is free. Even though it's like the worst thing I've ever used, but that's a whole other thing. I want to imagine that every time I say something like that on stream, I imagine that like the guy who made it or something is watching. I'm like, crap. You know.
Today GitHub is like, oh, I made GitHub. Oh no, yeah.
It was really difficult to use for us, but there are like plugins and stuff that would have made it easier in if we had invested, so to speak. Bootstraps. That's what we were doing. Um, while I was talking, some of you guys who were watching closely might have noticed something. So I was trying to put a little branch here, and I was using a different branch, this one, and I changed my mind, and I was like, you know what? I want to use this branch instead. So I literally just dragged it on, and I changed it. So that's cool, right? You can actually change the static mesh in the static mesh if you want. So there's my static mesh. I can literally drag any static mesh and it will use the same position, rotation, and scale in the worlds and just replace it. Isn't that nice? So I can replace it with anything, even another dragon if I wanted to. So that's kind of the fun of it all. It's all very, customizable. So I think you guys could watch. I could do this all day, like just force you guys to watch me place one rock at a time. I just thought that, instead of using the foliage tool, placing the rocks one at a time is going to be a little bit easier to control and also maybe give me better results. But right now it just kind of looks like they're kind of in a quarry or something place that's very dangerous for little dragons.
Can you use the scattering nature of the foliage tool with other objects? Let's say I wanted to create like a field of statues. Could I put those in there and have those be scattered? And
you can, yeah, you can do that with any static mesh at all.
Wow.
And you can control things like for the statues, you might not want them to rotate in certain ways and things like that. So you can control that inside of the settings. But yeah, you can use it with anything, which is super fun. So yeah, totally.
Thank you. Also, I got one more question from the chat. I've been trying to find like a space to ask this question, but there hasn't been a natural space. But since I'm interrupting you anyways, I'm just going to tack it on to this one. But John T was asking how to, like, can you animate in Unreal? And I know that there's animation in here, but I was curious about your experience, like what you actually can do in Unreal and what you personally animate in Unreal.
So yes, you can animate in Unreal. I believe that is something that they actually have been investing in a lot lately because of the convergence of worlds again. So we can animate anything, but we can also animate models like skeletal rigs now too. So you can do that, but you can also do like a more programmatic approach of like, blending animations and things like that, because you need that in a game. You actually need there to be what do you call it, like blending. Like let's say my character is walking and I turn the controller and I want to turn left. Well, you got to blend two animations together. So that's a whole system on its own, but you can animate. As far as I go, I only do one type of animation, which is kind of like the gameplay animation. Like you step on a platform, something happens, a door opens, the ceiling drops, things like that. That's the kind of animation I do, which I actually I barely even use Sequencer, which is like one of the tools that you can use for animation. There's multiple. I use Blueprints for that, which is the visual code that we use, yeah.
Okay, so in that case, you would probably, it's less of like creating keyframe animation and more like creating like if-then programmatic type stuff. If this happens, then trigger this animation or this particle effect or whatever.
And you can do that, but you can also like in the blueprints, there's like ways to do the nodes, that have animation inside them, and you can actually do keyframe animation inside, but it's limited. Like you wouldn't do it for the bones. You would just do like for this wall comes down. So you just would animate it in the worlds, like sliding down or things like that. Let's see. Okay. So let's change a little bit of the camera settings a little, just to improve the look, right? Because like we're gonna do that, like all of that, like fancy viz dev kind of thing next class or next week, but I still kind of want to just add a couple of things just to see if the composition is looking good. So I'm gonna find my camera, and the first thing I want to do is a vignette. I think a vignette will go a long way to save these little guys. So I'm gonna search for vignette. Vignette is how you spell it. And I'm gonna turn both of these on, and then I'm going to increase the intensity. Like so, and then you can also change the size. I'm just gonna leave it alone for now. So there we have a little vignette. And yeah, we'll do all the extra fun stuff later, but let me search for the depth of field again. Actually, it was focal point. And let's just mess with that a little bit so that we can kind of get that blurriness inside the water. Let's turn on our plane. Oh, that's bright. Oh my gosh. So this like darkening and lightening system is actually auto exposure, kind of like an annoying auto feature, of Unreal. Basically, it tries to balance out kind of like your natural eyes would if you walk out from like a really dark place into a light place. Like everything would look really bright, and if you did the inverse, everything would look really dark, and then it adapts over time. So that's what we're seeing. I ended up making a little water material. So let me go find it. So I'm going to search for water.
Now, do you use the water system that's in Unreal? That was also used to be like one of those things like Landmass that was like an experimental plugin, which I would imagine by Unreal 5 they would have incorporated into the thing. And it does kind of, yeah, stuff like this, that it's just kind of like a dynamic auto animating water sim. But you used to have to download the plugin and stuff.
In this case, it's just a material on a plane. Let me grab that. This is what the material looks like. I made this in class, so it's not the most advanced thing ever. It was just for teaching students. But basically, it's just a material that goes on the plane. And it does have inside of it, not to go too far into this, but it does have a special built-in water material node that they have added into Unreal. But I'm not sure exactly like which plugin you were referring to. Okay. Necessarily. But what makes this one cool, and I guess if it wasn't getting a little bit messed up by the lighting, but what makes this one cool is that if you get close to it, it ripples. So nice. So all the stuff like right here, like the rocks and stuff, they're like rippling in the water. So that's really fun. I think that stuff is fun. So I'm just gonna let this big guy ripple. I guess he's not in the frame. I'll just lower the water then. That's why we keep this here. It's like kind of keep looking at the composition of it all, I'm gonna work on this all weekend to get it looking cute. All right. So now we have a little bit of water. There's a little bit too much white in that water, but I can change a lot of the water settings by looking at the material instance, which I had mentioned earlier. Basically, this gives me a ton of like parameters for messing with the water shader. So let me put this kind of off to the side a little bit. For example, I can change how fast the waves move, like that. I think that's perfect, right? What do you guys think? So let's turn that maybe even down a little bit. I'm going to make the waves a little bit bigger, I think. Oh, wait, I'm moving the wrong direction. This is me, like, just as a human being. I will always pull the sliders, probably, like, odds are in the wrong direction first before the right direction. It's kind of like plugging in a USB. Some people are just, like, amazing at plugging in a USB on the first try. Not me so much. Oh, that's the ripples. It's too much, right? I'm just going to kind of mess with this until I find something that looks decent. I need the water to look more translucent. And I wish I had written down what each one of these sliders does. This is a great, I'm going to literally record this and send it to my students, because one of the outcomes of this was you had to think about the end user using your shader, and how they would use it. And I never specified for them to add tooltips. So next time, I'll be like, how about some tooltips, kids? What are these for? I don't know. But we can change like the color of the water and things like that. So this is here is kind of like what's making it so dark. I'm going to it's kind of like a teal green, I guess. Now we can kind of start seeing the outside a little bit more. So I'm just going to mess around with it more until we eventually get somewhere with it. All right. This whiteness is coming from the sky, so I might just have to tone down the sky again a little bit more. And stuff like that. But you guys see how we're kind of starting to get a scene together that makes a little by little, the scene is going to make more sense as an underwater scene. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And of course, it's going to get refined bit by bit. Another thing I wanted to add in to try to fake, basically, Unreal is not necessarily built for underwater scenes, right? So this is not necessarily normal. I just wanted to give us a challenge. So I'm going to fake it using atmospheric effects, camera effects, post-processing effects, VFX, as far as like bubbles and stuff. Like we're just going to have to trick the user into thinking that we're underwater. So I'm just going to bring some fog in and see if I can like crank it up a lot. Actually, I think I already had fog before. Let's find out. Looks like I have multiple fogs. I'm going to just crank both of them up like this enough that it starts kind of coming into the pond. Let me find the option for this. Let me see. Ever since they changed the UI, for some reason I've become blind to the words on screen. So I'm going to just search. And when in doubt, literally just start dragging stuff around. Like it will also help a little bit. Let's do the height fog. So fog density.
It's so tough with like all that long list of options.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I get lost so easily.
Fog scattering color. Oh, we're getting somewhere. This one's too white though, so let's make it teal green. And it's starting to kind of like get in the way of the lights traveling through the scene, right? It's no longer traveling so directly. It's kind of getting in the way. There's the opacity for us. So it's kind of a beginning. It's a beginning. It's a start. The real magic is going to be the post-processing effects directly on the camera. We're going to turn up contrast. We're going to turn up the colors and things like that. But we're definitely getting somewhere with this. Let me see if from here, it's kind of just a little bit of, refinement as we would wish. Let's also go ahead and change the camera. And although we have two actors, we might want to change the composition a little bit. So maybe I can even like pilot that carefully again. So, wrong button. I have to go to cinematic viewports, select which one I want. Then I can turn on my grid. I think something like this, like a low shot. I'm just a worm in the water, and they're coming for me. This is my worst nightmare come true. Oh, I like that those plants coming in. Oh, I accidentally rolled my mouse wheel, which I do all the time. And in Unreal, it can be a little dramatic sometimes. Something like this. I'm going to add some chromatic aberration. Oh my god, my favorite effect of all time, literally, if I could like throw chromatic aberration at everything, I would. Like, this is basically the effect that you would get with old cameras where the colors start to bleed out, like so. Like if I turn it way up, colors bleed out in certain directions, so you get like red, green, and blue splitting away from the main subjects. You can see that. Look at the color right here, for example. God, I love this thing. Like, but it's a great effect for your underwater scenes because it causes more distortion, and it's always good. So I'm gonna just kind of like change the offset a little bit so that we're not getting too much on our little dragons, and instead just getting it on the rocks and stuff like that. Let's see how far we can push this today. There's so much. Look at all these options, folks. Like, these aren't even open, we can change temperature. Oh, I kind of like that, like warmer. I don't know. Let's see the cooler too. What do you like, Chad?
I feel like I would lean towards the cooler thing because it's underwater, but that's just me, and maybe I'm just like too pedestrian in my preferences.
Why? No, you're good. Got a purple tint. How about that?
It's
little
crazy.
green tint. It's cool. Right. So like all of these options are actually very common in film and photography anyway. So if you know anything about that, it actually goes a long way to inform these decisions. Um, I don't even know half of these terms if I'm going to be honest with you. Like, let's look at what the slope does. Oh, it makes it like really unsaturated or like low contrast. But I kind of like the increasing the slope. That's neat. So you just gotta kind of like mess with it a little bit here and there. I actually took some film classes in college, but only a little bit of that knowledge came through for me. Um, so let's see what we can do also. What else would be good for underwater for now as like a placeholder, I guess, so that we can go to bed happy today. you know, I
I
think a
think
little bit of
Mike,
like blue.
we could mention that next week we'll talk a little bit about Magic Bullet looks in Unreal, and that kind of can really help you dial in a look really quick. That's just like a little thing that added to the post production volume. So just something to wet your whistle for next week.
I can't wait. Honestly, that's gonna be so exciting for me because I've never used it before and I don't know much about it.
That's cool. It makes things pretty easy.
I love it. I've always been so shy about plugins. Like, I for example, like I use default for everything. Default ZBrush, default everything. And I've been wanting one of my 2023 goals is to start using plugins. Let me pin this again. I'm gonna try kind of blocking out a little bit of the light by making some what do you call it? So just some cubes and stuff kind of coming in here and trying to hide the light. I'm just gonna throw on like a mossy rock texture or something, just to see if I can help myself kind of like cheat.
So you're using it like kind of like a bounce board then, like lights bouncing, like that's your background, like through the
Yeah.
water.
I'm
Oh,
trying
nice.
to like yeah. Since I know
Yeah.
it's not going to be in the actual thing, it's okay. You'd be surprised at the things that are in the background, right? Of of games and movies and things like that we don't expect you to see. And then like inevitably the players and viewers will see it, and then we'll be like, crap.
It looks good. It is good though.
Trying to create like a little bit more isolation in the scene and whatnot. It needs more color. So if I were to, do a little viz dev on my own, I'd probably get like a couple extra like pieces of. I would Google some like underwater pond um, vegetation that has like oranges and reds in it, I think, and try to put those in. Let's see if we have anything in here for those. So I'm going to select static mesh and kind of scroll down because everything's too green and blue right now, right? And I love a little bit of like cool and tone or cool and warm contrast. I think it helps a bunch. Let me go ahead and go to the straight up to the plants in here and then search for static mesh. That will help me. Oh, this was nice. Flowering plant. I'll just manually add one or two. Like discreetly somewhere, it's kind of too not very underwatery. We'll just call this a placeholder. And that's something I use all the time is placeholders, don't personally, I don't believe in spending a long time creating something that I don't know if it will work in the long run. And I would hate to scrap it. I hate like wasted work, So, if you have a good placeholder would help you decide what shape something should be, what color something should be, and things like that. And then you can just replace it later. So I prefer doing it that way. And you'll hear me talking about that whenever I'm doing literally anything like alphas in ZBrush or levels in Unreal, like everything. I'll just throw a placeholder on there. And I almost considered this whole level to be like that. Like I'm seeing what works and what doesn't, so that when I I'm ready, I will commit to what I think works and refine that. So over the week, you guys might not see this because I won't be live, but over the week I'll be, throwing some stuff together, maybe moving a couple of rocks, and things like that. Just really to refine this so that it's ready to go into week 4. you know so I always say, whenever you're watching these demos, like, we are on the timer, we got to do some decisions on the fly, but keep in mind that, like, artistic direction takes a while, to get perfect, um or at least as good as it can get in the time. I think I'm going to, like, eventually replace this with some sort of like reddish seaweed or whatever. And then I'm going to improve the lighting a little bit more before we meet again. Yeah,
It's also interesting too about like with like one of the comments in the chat was warm light, warm highlight, cool shadows, or cool highlight, warm shadows. That contrast is really cool, but it is a really interesting challenge trying to create that in this world because like the Pixar animators and lighters, when they were doing Finding Nemo, quickly learned there's a little bit of a clash because the lighters are using blue light and Nemo is orange, but when you light orange with blue, it creates black, and so you have to be aware of like all of the nuances. So like you added this like warm orange plant, but then it shows up as like a dark red because of the green and orange light. So it's kind of tricky to kind of like hack all that stuff to have a final result that's orange. And sometimes you have to do some weird backwards things when you color grade or whatever.
Fun fact. So the water in the world, if there's enough of it, it's blue, right? So it actually removes lights of certain colors the deeper you go. So if you go really deep underwater, you'll start noticing that things that are red are becoming more and more and more and more muted. It's really interesting to look at. In fact, Unreal's water plugins, they actually do that for you. Like if you put something red behind them, you'll actually take off the color. Let me actually show you. It's kind of cool. Let me go back to my default viewport here. And I'm going to just use the water the way it was meant to be. So I'm going to add a plane. Make that big. And I'm going to grab my water material. My water material used that particular...
I think, are you in the 3D plant directory? Will it search outside of that?
No, it won't. I had to jump out. Yeah. This was made in 427, which means it's like a little bit less transparent right now. I'll have to troubleshoot that. But basically, if I grab a sphere and I make it a nice red color, I'm just going to make a new material. Red. That up. I'm going to press 3 to just kind of get like a vector 3, which is like a color. Color is a vector 3 because it's RGB. It's 3
floats.
Yeah, 3 floats. Save. Apply that to my sphere. And I'm also going to open up my water just to make sure that the scattering is actually set up to do this. And let's see. As I go down further underwater, you see how it's sucking out the red from this color?
Yeah.
It's literally built to be like real water in the world. So ironically, putting on warm bounce lights, like the commenter said, it would make it really aesthetic, but it would kind of go against the physics of it all. So we can't do that. Like, you know what? We are the masters of this world. If we want warm bounce light, we can have it, It's just not necessarily something that would happen in a real pond.
Yeah.
There's like no warmth in this photo. The biggest point of contrast is that the main everything is teal, and then the seaweed is like a much more vibrant green, which is warmer than the teal. It has more yellow in it. So that's where the contrast is coming from. It's like so subtle, so subtle. But yeah, that's a little fun fact about water since we're doing a little bit of water stuff today.
That's cool. That was a great visual example. It was like very clear from that.
Yeah. There
Very
goes
cool.
my camera actor again, though.
Another question that we had in the chat was, is this going to be an animation? Are we going to animate this, the end result of this?
Depends if you guys want to bring me on for another 4 weeks. Just kidding. No, we're not going to animate it. We're going to animate some particles to go along with it. So like the bubbles and stuff that we're going to be actually making from scratch next week are going to be
Ooh.
technically animated. And also you could theoretically count the water as animated because it moves.
Yeah.
But animating these monsters is actually more of a problem than you might think, because it's not a problem. It's just a pipeline. You have to take them into software that allows for rigging. You have to put in all the bones. You have to constrain the bones to control so that you can actually use them. You have to weight paint the monster to the bones. You have to then animate, um, and only then, only then will you be recognized. I have Chad's face. Like, that sounds like a nightmare. It is.
Sorry.
It is a
Sorry.
nightmare.
I just rigging and like vertex weights. Like, ugh, it's like the
I don't
worst
like that
thing in
stuff
the
either.
world. Oh my goodness gracious. What, so, is this like a spoiler? If are you gonna make the bubbles in Niagara, or are you gonna
Yes, we
do?
are.
Oh, fun. Whoop, whoop.
Yep, Niagara bubbles. And yeah, Niagara is amazing. Well, okay, it's complicated because its UI breaks the pattern that we are used to in Unreal. Like, at least me. Everything's like node based, and Niagara is more like a stack based. If that's even a thing. That's what I call it. So it's a little bit more complicated because it exposes too many parameters and choices all at once. And I find that that's like difficult for people who don't do it all the time. You know, like it's all there for you, and you're like, oh my god, what is this even? And you're like, oh, okay. But we're gonna get into that, and I'll talk about like the ultra basics that it takes to do bubbles. In fact, bubbles happens to be the one demo I do over and over again for Niagara. That's my intro lecture. So we'll be doing that together. I'm
Cool.
actually doing it tomorrow in school, so I'll be
Warm up.
fresh. Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to be doing a couple of bubbles, and we're just going to fake some animation by having them be posed, at least in the final render.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And,
love that. If
um,
anybody's a Trap Code Particular fan, Niagara I found to be like very similar. Like the background that I had in Trap Code Particular made a lot of stuff make sense in Niagara when just doing like a simple particle system. So that's fun.
I want to see what a light looked like. Terrifying. Yeah, we're going to be doing lighting and all that, like kind of like finalizing soon next week. I think we're pretty much done for today. Chad, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's it. Just that next week we'll be off doing. We're gonna be, yeah, like you said, the Niagara. We'll be doing some magic bullet looks for some like additional like color tweaking and such. But yeah, I'm gonna be bummed that this is done. I've like learned so much, and then today the thing about like blocking, it's just like fantastic. Just like really really cool tips and the gray boxing, as they call it in the industry.
Gray
Um,
box.
very very cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Anna, for another amazing lesson full of knowledge. It's like you know so much about so many things. It's like
Oh,
really impressive. It's awe-inspiring. Also, thanks to Max behind the scenes, producer extraordinaire, who's keeping the show running and keeping everything going smoothly, and Dr. Sassy for creating the timestamps so that you can watch this on YouTube and have everything cataloged and jump right to where you need. But yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for your comments. Some really great suggestions and comments in the ideas in the comments. So we really appreciate that. And yeah, we hope to see everybody next week. Anna, thank you again for this. It's been amazing.
Have a great rest of your week, folks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye bye.